Day 8. The 10th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information, or to volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. Reading by Andy Minter. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 8. The 10th story. A Sicilian woman cunningly conveys from a merchant that which he has brought to Palermo. He, making a show of being come back thither with a far greater store of goods than before, borrows money of her, and leaves her in lieu thereof water and tow.
How much in diverse passages the Queen's story moved the ladies to laughter, it boots not to ask. None was there in whose eyes the tears stood not full a dozen times for excess of merriment. However, it being ended, and Dioneo witting that it was now his turn, thus spake he:
Gracious ladies, 'tis patent to all that wiles are diverting in the degree of the wiliness of him that is by them beguiled. Wherefore, albeit stories most goodly have been told by you all, I purpose to relate one which should afford you more pleasure than any that has been told, seeing that she that was beguiled was far more cunning in beguiling others than any of the beguiled of whom you have spoken. There was, and perhaps still is, a custom in all maritime countries that have ports, that all merchants arriving there with merchandise should, on discharging, bring all their goods into a warehouse, called in many places a dogana, and maintained by the state or the lord of the land, where those that are assigned to that office allot to each merchant, on receipt of an invoice of all his goods and the value thereof, a room in which he stores his goods under lock and key. Whereupon the said officers of the dogana enter all the merchant's goods to his credit in the book of the dogana, and afterwards make him pay duty thereon, or on such part as he withdraws from the warehouse. By which book of the dogana the brokers not seldom find out the sorts and quantities of the merchandise that is there, and also who are the owners thereof, with whom, as occasion serves, they afterwards treat of exchanges, barters, sales, and other modes of disposing of the goods. Which custom obtained, as in many other places, so also at Palermo in Sicily, where in like manner there were and are not a few women, fair as fair can be, but foes to virtue, who, by whoso knows them not, would be reputed great and most virtuous ladies. And being given not merely to fleece, but utterly to flay men, they no sooner espy a foreign merchant in the city, than they find out from the book of the dogana how much he has there, and what he is good for, and then, by caressing and amorous looks and gestures and words of honeyed sweetness, they strive to entice and allure the merchant to their love, and not seldom have they succeeded, and wrested from him great part or the whole of his merchandise, and of some they have gotten goods and ship and flesh and bones, so delightsomely have they known how to ply the shears. Now it is not long since one of our young Florentines, Niccolo da Signano by name, albeit he was called Salibaito, arrived there, being sent by his masters with all the woollen stuffs that he had not been able to dispose of at Salerno fair, which might perhaps be worth 500 florins of gold. And having given the invoice to the officers of the dogana and stored the goods, Salibaito was in no hurry to get them out of bond, but took a stroll or two about the city for his diversion. And as he was fresh complexioned and fair, and not a little debonair, it so befell that one of these ladies that plied the shears, and called herself Jancofiore, began to ogle him, whereof he, taking note, and deeming that she was a great lady, supposed that she was taken by his good looks, and cast about how he might manage this amour with all due discretion. Wherefore, saying naught to a soul, he began to pass to and fro before her house, which she observing, occupied herself for a few days in inflaming his passion, and then, affecting to be dying of love for him, sent privily to him a woman that she had in her service, and who was an adept in the arts of the procuress. She, after not a little palaver, told him, while the tears all but stood in her eyes, that for his handsome person and winsome air, her mistress was so enamoured of him, that she found no peace by day or by night, and therefore, if 'twere agreeable to him, there was naught she desired so much as to meet him privily at a bagnio, whereupon she drew a ring from her purse, and gave it him by way of token from her mistress. Overjoyed as ne'er another to hear such good news, Salavito took the ring, and after drawing it across his eyes and kissing it, put it on his finger, and told the good woman that if Madonna Jancofiore loved him, she was well requited, for that he loved her more dearly than himself, and that he was ready to meet her wherever and whenever she might see fit. With which answer the procuress hied her back to her mistress, and shortly afterwards Salavito was informed that he was to meet the lady at a certain bagnio at vespers of the ensuing day. So, saying naught to a soul of the matter, he hied him punctually at the appointed hour to the bagnio, and found that it had been taken by the lady. Nor had he long to wait before two female slaves made their appearance, bearing on their heads, the one a great and goodly mattress of wadding, and the other a huge and well-filled basket, and having laid the mattress on a bedstead in one of the rooms of the bagnio, they covered it with a pair of sheets of the finest fabric, bordered with silk, and a quilt of the whitest Cyprus buckram, with two daintily embroidered pillows. The slaves then undressed and got into the bath, which they thoroughly washed and scrubbed, whither soon afterwards the lady, attended by two other female slaves, came, and made haste to greet Salavito with the heartiest of cheer, and when, after heaving many a mighty sigh, she had embraced and kissed him, "I know not," quoth she, "who but thou could have brought me to this. Such a fire hast thou kindled in my soul, little dog of a Tuscan." Whereupon she was pleased that they should undress, and get into the bath, and two of the slaves with them, which accordingly they did, and she herself, suffering none other to lay a hand upon him, did with wondrous care wash Salavito from head to foot with soap perfumed with musk and cloves, after which she let the slaves wash and shampoo herself. The slaves then brought two spotless sheets of finest texture, which emitted such a scent of roses that 'twere as if there was naught there but roses, in one of which, having wrapped Salavito, and in the other the lady, they bore them both to bed, where, the sheets in which they were enfolded being withdrawn by the slaves as soon as they had done sweating, they remained stark naked in the others. The slaves then took from the basket cruets of silver most goodly, and full, this of rosewater, that of water of orange blossom, a third of water of jasmine blossom, and a fourth of camphor water, wherewith they sprinkled them. After which, boxes of comfits and the finest wines being brought forth, they regaled them awhile. To Salavito 'twas as if he were in paradise. 1,000 times he scanned the lady, who was indeed most beautiful, and he counted each hour as 100 years, until the slaves should get them gone, and he find himself in the lady's arms. At length, by the lady's command, the slaves departed, leaving a lighted torch in the room, and then the lady and Salavito embraced, and to Salavito's prodigious delight, for it seemed to him that she was all but dissolved for love of him, tarried there a good while. However, the time came when the lady must needs rise, so she called the slaves, with whose help they dressed, regaled themselves again for a while with wine and comfits, and washed their faces and hands with the odoriferous waters. Then, as they were going, quoth the lady to Salavito, "If it be agreeable to thee, I should deem it a very great favour if thou wouldst come to-night to sup and sleep with me." Salavito, who, captivated by her beauty and her studied graciousness, never doubted but that he was as dear to her as her very heart, made answer, "Madam, there is naught you can desire but is in the last degree agreeable to me, wherefore to-night and ever 'tis my purpose to do whatsoever you may be pleased to command." So home the lady hied her, and having caused a brave show to be made in her chamber, with her dresses and other paraphernalia, and a grand supper to be prepared, awaited Salavito, who, being come there as soon as 'twas dark, had of her a gladsome welcome, and was regaled with an excellent and well-served supper, after which they repaired to the chamber, where he was saluted by a wondrous sweet odour of aloe wood, and observed that the bed was profusely furnished with birds after the fashion of Cyprus, and that not a few fine dresses were hanging on the pegs, which circumstances did one and all beget in him the belief that this must be a great and wealthy lady, and though he had heard a hint or two to the contrary touching her life, he would by no means credit them, nor, supposing that she had perchance taken another with guile, would he believe that the same thing might befall him. So, to his exceeding great solace, he lay with her that night, and ever grew more afire for her. On the morrow, as she was investing him with a fair and dainty girdle of silver, with a goodly purse attached, "Sweet my Salabito," quoth she, "prithee forget me not. Even as my person, so is all that I have at thy pleasure, and all that I can at thy command." Salabito then embraced and kissed her, and so bade her adieu, and betook him to the place where the merchants were wont to congregate. And so it befell that he, continuing to consort with her from time to time, and being never a denier the poorer thereby, disposed of his merchandise for ready money, and at no small profit, whereof, not by him, but by another, the lady was forthwith advised. And Salabito, being come to see her one evening, she greeted him gaily and gamesomely, and fell a kissing and hugging him, and made as if she was so afire for love of him that she was like to die thereof in his arms, and offered to give him 2 most goodly silver cups that she had, which Salabito would not accept, having already had from her, taking one time with another, full 30 florins of gold, while he had not been able to induce her to touch so much of a groat of his money. But when by this show of passion and generosity she had thoroughly kindled his flame, in came, as she had arranged, one of her slaves, and spoke to her, whereupon out of the room she went, and after a while came back in tears, and threw herself prone on the bed, and set up the most dolorous lamentation that ever woman made. Whereat Salabito, wondering, took her in his arms, and mingled his tears with hers, and said, "Alas, heart of my body, what ails thee thus of a sudden? Wherefore art thou so distressed? Ah, tell me the reason, my soul." The lady allowed him to run on in this strain for a good while, and then, "Alas, sweet my lord," quoth she, "I know not either what to do or what to say. I have but now received a letter from Messina, in which my brother bids me sell, if need be, all that I have here, and send him without fail within 8 days 1,000 florins of gold, otherwise he will forfeit his head. I know not how to come by them so soon. Had I but 15 days, I would make shift to raise them in a quarter where I might raise a much larger sum, or I would sell one of our estates. But as this may not be, would I had been dead, or ere this bad news had reached me." Which said, affecting to be utterly broken hearted, she ceased not to weep. Salabito, the ardour of whose passion had in great measure deprived him of the sagacity which the circumstances demanded, supposed that the tears were genuine enough, and the words even more so. Wherefore, "Madam," quoth he, "I could not furnish you with 1,000, but if 500 florins of gold would suffice, they are at your service. If you think you could repay them within 15 days, and you may deem yourself in luck's way, for 'twas only yesterday that I sold my woollens, which had I not done I could not have lent you a groat." "Alas!" returned the lady, "then thou hast been in straits for money. Oh, why didst thou not apply to me? Though I have not 1,000 at my command, I could have given thee quite 100, nay, indeed 200 florins. By what thou hast said, thou hast made me hesitate to accept the service that thou proposest to render me." Which words fairly delivered Salabito into the lady's hands, insomuch that, "Madam," quoth he, "I would not have you decline my help for such a scruple, for had my need been as great as yours, I should certainly have applied to you." Quoth then the lady, "Ah, Salabito mine, well I wot the love that thou bearest me is a true and perfect love, seeing that without waiting to be asked thou dost so handsomely come to my aid with so large a sum of money. And albeit I was thine without this token of thy love, yet assuredly it has made me thine in an even greater degree, nor shall I ever forget that 'tis to thee I owe my brother's life. But God knows I take thy money from thee reluctantly, seeing that thou art a merchant, and 'tis by means of money that merchants conduct all their affairs. But as necessity constrains me, and I have good hope of speedily repaying thee, I will even take it, and by way of security, if I should find no readier method, I will pawn all that I have here." Which said, she burst into tears, and fell upon Salavito, pressing her cheek upon his. Salavito tried to comfort her, and having spent the night with her, on the morrow, being minded to show himself her most devoted servant, brought her, without awaiting any reminder, 500 fine florins of gold, which she, laughing at heart, while the tears streamed from her eyes, took, Salavito trusting her mere promise of repayment. Now that the lady had gotten the money, the complexion of affairs began to alter, and whereas Salavito had been wont to have free access to her whenever he was so minded, now, for one reason or another, he was denied admittance 6 times out of 7, nor did she greet him with the same smile, or shower on him the same caresses, or do him the same cheer as of yore. So a month, 2 months passed, beyond the time when he was to have been repaid his money, and when he demanded it, he was put off with words, whereby Salavito, being now ware of the cheat which his slender wit had suffered the ill-disposed woman to put upon him, and also that, having neither writing nor witness against her, he was entirely at her mercy in regard of his claim, and being moreover ashamed to lodge any complaint with any one, as well because he had been forewarned of her character as because he dreaded the ridicule to which his folly justly exposed him, was chagrined beyond measure, and inly bewailed his simplicity. And his masters having written to him, bidding him change the money and remit it to them, he, being apprehensive that, making default as he must, he should, if he remained there, be detected, resolved to depart, and having taken ship, he repaired, not as he should have done, to Pisa, but to Naples, where at that time resided our gossip Pietro del Cagnano, treasurer of the Empress of Constantinople, a man of great sagacity and acuteness, and a very great friend of Salavito and his kinsfolk, to whom, trusting in his great discretion, Salavito after a while discovered his distress, telling him what he had done, and the sorry plight in which by consequence he stood, and craving his aid and counsel, that he might the more readily find means of livelihood there, for that he was minded never to go back to Florence. Impatient to hear of such folly, "'Twas ill done of thee," quoth Calignano. "Thou hast misbehaved thyself, wronged thy masters, and squandered an exorbitant sum in lewdness. However, 'tis done, and we must consider of the remedy." And indeed, like the shrewd man that he was, he had already bethought him what was best to be done, and forthwith he imparted it to Salavito, which expedient Salavito approving, resolved to make the adventure, and having still a little money, and being furnished with a loan by Caniano, he provided himself with not a few bales, well and closely corded, and bought some 20 oil casks, which he filled, and having put all on shipboard, returned to Palermo. There he gave the invoice of the bales, as also of the oil casks, to the officers of the Regano, and having them all entered to his credit, laid them up in the storerooms, saying that he purposed to leave them there until the arrival of other merchandise that he expected. Which Jancofiore learning, and being informed that the merchandise that he had brought with him was worth fully 2000 florins of gold, or even more, besides that which he expected, which was valued at more than 3000 florins of gold, bethought her that she had not aimed high enough, and that 'twere well to refund him the 500, if so she might make the greater part of the 5000 florins her own. Wherefore she sent for him, and Salavito, having learned his lesson of cunning, waited upon her. Feigning to know naught of the cargo he had brought with him, she received him with marvellous cheer, and began, "Lo now, if thou wast angry with me because I did not repay thee thy money in due time." But Salavito interrupted her, saying with a laugh, "Madam, 'tis true I was a little vexed, seeing that I would have plucked out my heart to pleasure you. But listen, and you shall learn the quality of my displeasure. Such and so great is the love I bear you, that I have sold the best part of all that I possess, whereby I have already in this port merchandise to the value of more than 2,000 florins, and expect from the Levant other goods to the value of above 3,000 florins, and mean to set up a warehouse in this city, and live here, to be ever near you, for that I deem myself more blessed in your love than any other that lives." Whereupon, "Hark ye, Salavito," quoth the lady, "whatever advantages thee is mighty grateful to me, seeing that I love thee more than my very life, and right glad I am that thou art come back with intent to stay, for I hope to have many a good time with thee. But something I must say to thee by way of excuse, for that whilst thou wast thinking of taking thy departure, there were times when thou wast disappointed of seeing me, and others when thou hadst not as gladsome a welcome as thou wast wont to have. And therewithal I kept not the time promised for the repayment of thy money. Thou must know that I was then in exceeding great trouble and tribulation, and whoso is thus bested, love he another never so much, cannot greet him with as gladsome a mien, or be as attentive to him as he had life. And thou must further know that 'tis by no means an easy matter for a lady to come by 1,000 florins of gold. Why, 'tis every day a fresh lie, and never a promise kept, and so we in our turn must needs lie to others. And 'twas for this cause, and not for any fault of mine, that I did not repay thee thy money. However, I had it but a little while after thy departure, and had I known whither to send it, be sure I would have remitted it to thee. But as that I wist not, I have kept it safe for thee." She then produced a purse, in which were the very same coins that he had brought her, and placed it in his hand, saying, "Count, and see if there are 500 there." 'Twas the happiest moment Salavito had yet known, as, having told them out, and found the sum exact, he made answer, "Madam, I know that you say sooth, and what you have done abundantly proves it. Wherefore, and for the love I bear you, I warrant you there is no sum you might ask of me on any occasion of need, with which, if 'twere in my power, I would not accommodate you. Whereof, when I am settled here, you will be able to assure yourself." Having thus in words reinstated himself as her lover, he proceeded to treat her as his mistress, whereto she responded, doing all that was in her power to pleasure and honour him, and feigning to be in the last degree enamoured of him. But Salavito, being minded to requite her guile with his own, went to her one evening, being bidden to sup and sleep with her, with an aspect so melancholy and dolorous that he showed as he had lief given up the ghost. Biancafiore, as she embraced and kissed him, demanded of him the occasion of his melancholy. Whereto he, having let her be instant with him a good while, made answer, "I am undone, for that ship, having aboard her the goods that I expected, has been taken by the corsairs of Monaco, and held to ransom in 10,000 florins of gold, of which it falls to me to pay 1,000. And I have not a denier, for the 500 thou repaidst to me I sent forthwith to Naples to buy stuffs for this market. And were I to sell the merchandise I have here, as 'tis not now the right time to sell, I should scarce get half the value, nor am I as yet so well known here as to come by any to help me at this juncture, and so what to do or what to say I know not. But this I know, that if I send not the money without delay, my merchandise will be taken to Monaco, and I shall never touch aught of it again." Whereat the lady was mightily annoyed, being apprehensive of losing all, and bethought her how she might prevent the goods going to Monaco. Wherefore, "God knows," quoth she, "that for the love I bear thee I am not a little sorry for thee, but what boots it idly to distress oneself? Had I the money, God knows I would lend it thee forthwith, but I have it not. One indeed there is that accommodated me a day or two ago with 500 florins that I stood in need of, but he requires a heavy usance, not less than 30 on the 100, and if thou shouldst have recourse to him, good security must be forthcoming. Now, for my part, I am ready, so I may serve thee, to pledge all these dresses, and my person to boot, for as much as he will lend thee thereon. But how wilt thou secure the balance?" Salavito divined the motive that prompted her thus to accommodate him, and that she was to lend the money herself, which, suiting his purpose well, he first of all thanked her, and then said that, being constrained by necessity, he would not stand out against exorbitant terms, adding that as to the balance he would secure it upon the merchandise that he had at the Dogana by causing it to be entered into the name of the lender, but that he must keep the key of the storerooms, as well that he might be able to show the goods, if requested, as to make sure that none of them should be tampered with, or changed, or exchanged. The lady said that this was reasonable, and that 'twas excellent security. So, betimes on the morrow, the lady sent for a broker in whom she reposed much trust, and having talked the matter over with him, gave him 1,000 florins of gold, which the broker took to Salavito, and thereupon had all that Salavito had at the Dogana entered in his name. They then had the script and counterscript made out, and the arrangement, thus concluded, went about their respective affairs. Salavito lost no time in getting aboard a bark with his 500 florins of gold, and being come to Naples, sent thence a remittance, which fully discharged his obligation to his masters that had entrusted him with the stuffs. He also paid all that he owed to Pietro del Cagnano, and all his other creditors, and made not a little merry with Cagnano over the trick that he had played on the Sicilian lady. He then departed from Naples, and being minded to have done with mercantile affairs, betook him to Ferrara. Jancofiore, surprised at first by Salavito's disappearance from Palermo, waxed after a while suspicious, and when she had waited fully 2 months, seeing that he did not return, she caused the broker to break open the storerooms, and trying first of all the casks, she found them full of sea water, save that in each there was perhaps a hogshead of oil floating on the surface. Then, undoing the bales, she found them all, save 2 that contained stuffs, full of tow, and in short their whole contents put together were not worth more than 200 florins. Wherefore Jancofiore, knowing herself to have been outdone, regretted long and bitterly the 500 florins of gold that she had refunded, and still more the 1,000 that she had lent, repeating many a time to herself, "Who with a Tuscan has to do, has need of eyesight quick and true." Thus, left with the loss and the laugh against her, she discovered that there were others as knowing as she. End of Day 8, the 10th story.
Day 8. The conclusion of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by H. M. Rigg. Day the 8th. The conclusion. No sooner was Dioneo's story ended than Lauretta, witting that therewith the end of her sovereignty was come, bestowed her meed of praise on Pietro Canigiano for his good counsel, and also on Salabaeto for the equal sagacity which he displayed in carrying it out, and then, taking off the laurel wreath, set it on the head of Emilia, saying graciously, "I know not, madame, how debonair a queen you may prove, but at least we shall have in you a fair one. Be it your care, then, that you exercise your authority in a manner answerable to your charms." Which said, she resumed her seat. Not so much to receive the crown as to be thus commended to her face, and before the company, for that which ladies are wont to covet the most. Emilia was a little shamefast. A tint like that of the newly blown rose overspread her face, and the while she stood silent with downcast eyes. Then, as the blush faded away, she raised them, and having given her seneschal her commands touching all matters pertaining to the company, thus she spake: "Sweet my ladies, 'tis matter of common experience, that when the oxen have swunken a part of the day under a coercive yoke, they are relieved thereof and loosed, and suffered to go seek their pasture at their own sweet will in the woods. Nor can we fail to observe that gardens luxuriant with diversity of leafage are not less, but far more fair to see than woods wherein is naught but oaks. Therefore I deem that, as for so many days our discourse has been confined within the bounds of certain laws, it will be not only meet but profitable for us, being in need of relaxation, to roam a while, and so recruit our strength to undergo the yoke once more. And therefore I am minded that tomorrow the sweet tenor of your discourse be not confined to any particular theme, but that you be at liberty to discourse on such wise as to each may seem best. For well assured am I that thus to speak of diverse matters will be no less pleasurable than to limit ourselves to one topic, and by reason of this enlargement my successor in the sovereignty will find you more vigorous, and be therefore all the more forward to reimpose upon you the wonted restraint of our laws. Having so said, she dismissed all the company until supper time. All approved the wisdom of what the queen had said, and being risen betook them to their several diversions, the ladies to weave garlands and otherwise disport them, the young men to play and sing, and so they whiled away the hours until supper time, which being come, they gathered about the fair fountain, and took their meal with gay and festal cheer. Supper ended, they addressed them to their wonted pastime of song and dance, at the close of which the queen, notwithstanding the songs which divers of the company had already gladly accorded them, called for another from Pamphilo, who without the least demur thus sang:
So great, O love, the bliss through thee I prove, so jocund my estate, that in thy flame to burn I bless my fate. Such plenitude of joy my heart doth know, of that high joy and rare, wherewith thou hast me blessed, as, bounds disdaining, still doth overflow, and by my radiant air my blitheness manifest. For by thee, thus possessed with love, where meeter 'twere to venerate, I still consume within thy flame elate. Well wot I, love, no song may e'er reveal, nor any sign declare, what in my heart is pent. Nay, might they so, that were I best conceal, whereof were others ware, 'twould serve but to torment me, whose is such content, that weak were words, and all inadequate, a tittle of my bliss to adumbrate. Who would have dreamed that ere in mine embrace her I should clip and fold, whom there I still do feel, or as 'gainst her face ere to lay my face, attain such grace untold, and unimagined weal. Wherefore my bliss I seal of mine own heart within the circuit strait, and still in thy sweet flame luxuriate.
So ended Pamphilo his song, whereto all the company responded in full chorus, nor was there any but gave to its words an inordinate degree of attention, endeavouring by conjecture to penetrate that which he intimated that it was meet he should keep secret. Diverse were the interpretations hazarded, but all were wide of the mark. At length, however, the queen, seeing that ladies and men alike were fain of rest, bade all betake them to bed. End of conclusion of the 8th day. Day 9. The Introduction of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by M. Rigg. Day 9. The Introduction. Endeth here the 8th day of the Decameron, beginneth the 9th, in which, under the rule of Emilia, discourse is had, at the discretion of each, of such matters as most commend themselves to each in turn. The luminary, before whose splendor the night takes wing, had already changed the 8th heaven from azure to the lighter blue, and in the meads the flowers were beginning to lift their heads, when Emilia, being risen, roused her fair gossips, and likewise the young men. And so the queen leading the way at an easy pace, and the rest of the company following, they hied them to a copse at no great distance from the palace; where, being entered, they saw the goats and stags and other wild creatures, as if witting that in this time of pestilence they had naught to fear from the hunter, stand awaiting them with no more sign of fear than if they had been tamed. And so, making now towards this, now towards the other of them as if to touch them, they diverted themselves for a while by making them skip and run. But as soon as the sun was in the ascendant, by common consent they turned back, and whoso met them, garlanded as they were with oak leaves, and carrying store of fragrant herbs or flowers in their hands, might well have said, either shall death not vanquish these, or they will meet it with a light heart. So slowly wended they their way, now singing, now bandying gibes and merry jests, to the palace, where they found all things in order meet, and their servants in blithe and merry cheer. Awhile they rested, nor went they to table until 6 ditties, each gayer than that which went before, had been sung by the young men and the ladies; which done, they washed their hands, and all by the queen's command were ranged by the seneschal at the table, and the viands being served, they cheerily took their meal, wherefrom being risen, they trod some measures to the accompaniment of music, and then by the queen's command, whoso would be took him to rest. However, the accustomed hour being come, they all gathered at the wonted spot for their discoursing, and the queen, bending her regard upon Philomela, bade her make a beginning of the day's story telling, which she with a smile did on this wise. End of Introduction of the Day 9.
Day 9, the first story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by J.C. Guan. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J.M. Rigg. Day 9, the first story. Madonna Francesca, having 2 lovers, the one Rinuccio, the other Alessandro, by name, and loving neither of them, induces the one to simulate a corpse in a tomb, and the other to enter the tomb to fetch him out, whereby, neither satisfying her demands, she artfully rids herself of both. Madam, since so it pleases you, well pleased am I that in this vast, this boundless field of discourse, which you, our Lady Beautiful, have furnished us withal, 'tis mine to run the first course, wherein, if I do well, I doubt not that those who shall follow me will do not well but better. Such, my sweet ladies, has been the tenor of our discourse, that times not a few the might of love, how great and singular it is, has been set forth, but yet I doubt the topic is not exhausted, nor would it be so, though we should continue to speak of naught else for the space of a full year. And as love not only leads lovers to debate with themselves whether they were not best to die, but also draws them into the houses of the dead in quest of the dead, I am minded in this regard to tell you a story, wherein you will not only discern the power of love, but will also learn how the ready wit of a worthy lady enabled her to disembarrass herself of 2 lovers, whose love was displeasing to her. Know then that there dwelt aforetime in the city of Pistoia a most beauteous widow lady, of whom it so befell that 2 of our citizens, the one Rinuccio Palermini, the other Alessandro Chiaramontesi by name, tarrying at Pistoia, for that they were banished from Florence, became, neither witting how it stood with the other, in the last degree enamoured. Wherefore each used all his arts to win the love of Madonna Francesca de Lazzari. Such was the lady's name, and she, being thus continually plied with embassages and entreaties on the part of both, and having indiscreetly lent ear to them from time to time, found it no easy matter discreetly to extricate herself, when she was minded to be rid of their pestering, until it occurred to her to adopt the following expedient, to wit, to require of each a service, such as, though not impracticable, she deemed none would actually perform, to the end that, they making default, she might have a decent and colourable pretext for the refusing any longer to receive their embassages. Which expedient was on this wise. One day there died in Pistoia, and was buried in a tomb outside the church of the Friars Minors, a man, who, though his forebears had been gentlefolk, was reputed the very worst man, not in Pistoia only, but in all the world. And therewithal he was of form and feature so prematurely hideous, that whoso knew him not could scarce see him for the first time without a shudder. Now the lady pondering her design on the day of this man's death, it occurred to her that he might in a measure subserve its accomplishment. Wherefore she said to her maid, "Thou knowest to what worry and annoyance I am daily put by the embassages of these two Florentines, Rinuccio and Alessandro. Now I am not disposed to gratify either of them with my love, and therefore, to shake them off, I am minded, as they make such great protestations, to put them to the proof by requiring of each something which I am sure he will not perform, and thus to rid myself of their pestering. So list what I mean to do. Thou knowest that this morning there was interred in the ground of the Friars Minors the Scanadio, such was the name of the bad man of whom we spoke but now, whose aspect, while yet he lived, appalled even the bravest among us. Thou wilt therefore go privately to Alessandro, and say to him, Madonna Francesca sends thee word by me that the time is now come when thou mayest win that which thou hast so much desired, to wit, her love and joyance thereof, if thou be so minded, on the following terms, for a reason which thou shalt learn hereafter. One of her kinsmen is to bring home to her tonight the corpse of Scanadio, who was buried this morning, and she, standing in mortal dread of this man, would fain not see him, wherefore she prays thee to do her a great service, and be so good as to get thee this evening, at the hour of first sleep, to the tomb wherein Scanadio is buried, and go in, and having wrapped thyself in his grave clothes, lie there, as thou wert Scanadio himself, until one come for thee, when thou must say never a word, but let him carry thee forth, and bear thee to Madonna Francesca's house, where she will give thee welcome, and let thee stay with her, until thou art minded to depart, and for the rest thou wilt leave it to her. And if he says that he will gladly do so, well and good; if not, then thou wilt tell him from me, never more to show himself where I am, and as he values his life, to have a care to send me no more embassages. Which done, thou wilt go to Rinuccio Palermini, and wilt say to him, Madonna Francesca lets thee know that she is ready in all respects to comply with thy wishes, so thou wilt do her a great service, which is on this wise. Tonight, about midnight, thou must go to the tomb wherein was this morning interred Scanadio, and saying never a word, whatever thou mayst hear or otherwise be ware of, bear him gently forth to Madonna Francesca's house, where thou shalt learn wherefore she requires this of thee, and shalt have thy solace of her. And if thou art not minded to obey her in this, say that thou never more send her ambassage. The maid did her mistress's errand, omitting nothing, to both the men, and received from each the same answer, to wit, that to pleasure the lady he would adventure a journey to hell, to say nothing of entering a tomb. With which answer the maid returned to the lady, who waited to see if they would be such fools as to make it good. Night came, and at the hour of first sleep Alessandro Chiaramontesi, stripped to his doublet, quitted his house, and bent his steps towards Scanadio's tomb, with intent there to take the dead man's place. As he walked, there came upon him a great fear, and he fell a saying to himself, "Ah, what a fool am I! Whither go I? How know I that her kinsmen, having detected my love, and surmising that which is not, have not put her upon requiring this of me, in order that they may slay me in the tomb? In which event I alone should be the loser, for not would I ever be heard of it, so that they would escape scot-free. Or how know I but that 'tis some machination of one of my ill-wishers, whom perchance she loves, and is therefore minded to abet? And again quoth he to himself, but allowing that 'tis neither the one nor the other, and that her kinsmen are really to carry me to her house, I scarce believe that 'tis either that they would fain embrace Canadio's corpse themselves, or let her do so; rather it must be that they have a mind to perpetrate some outrage upon it, for that perchance he once did them an evil turn. She bids me never say a word, no matter what I may hear or be otherwise ware of. Suppose they were to pluck out my eyes, or my teeth, or cut off my hands, or treat me with some other horseplay of the like sort? How then? How could I keep quiet? And if I open my mouth, they will either recognize me, and perchance do me a mischief, or, if they spare me, I shall have been at pains for naught, for they will not leave me with the lady, and she will say that I disobeyed her commands, and I shall never have aught of her favours." As thus he communed with himself, he was on the point of turning back, but his overmastering love piled him with opposing arguments of such force that he kept on his way, and reached the tomb, which having opened, he entered, and after stripping Scanadio, and wrapping himself in the grave-clothes, closed it, and laid himself down in Scanadio's place. He then fell a thinking of the dead man, and his manner of life, and the things which he had heard tell of as happening by night, and in other less appalling places than the houses of the dead, whereby all the hairs of his head stood on end, and he momently expected Scanadio to rise and cut his throat. However, the ardour of his love so fortified him that he overcame these and all other timorous apprehensions, and lay as if he were dead, awaiting what should betide him. Towards midnight, Rinuccio, bent likewise upon fulfilling his lady's behest, sallied forth of his house, revolving as he went divers forebodings of possible contingencies, as that, having Scanadio's corpse upon his shoulders, he might fall into the hands of the Signory, and be condemned to the fire as a wizard, or that, should the affair get wind, it might embroil him with his kinsfolk, or the like, which gave him pause. But then, with a revulsion of feeling, "Shall I," quoth he to himself, "deny this lady, whom I so much have loved and love, the very first thing that she asks of me, and that too when I am thereby to win her favour? No, that were as much as my life is worth, far be it from me to fail of keeping my word." So on he fared, and arrived at the tomb, which he had no difficulty in opening, and being entered, laid hold of Alessandro, who, though in mortal fear, had given no sign of life, by the feet, and dragged him forth, and having hoisted him on to his shoulders, bent his steps towards the lady's house. And as he went, being none too careful of Alessandro, he swung him from time to time against one or other of the angles of certain benches that were by the wayside, and indeed the night was so dark and murky that he could not see where he was going. And when he was all but on the threshold of the lady's house, she standing within at a window with her maid, to mark if Rinuccio would bring Alessandro, and being already provided with an excuse for sending them both away, it so befell that the patrol of the Signory, who were posted in the street in dead silence, being on the lookout for a certain bandit, hearing the tramp of Rinuccio's feet, suddenly showed a light, the better to know what was toward, and whither to go, and advancing targes and lances, cried out, "Who goes there?" Whereupon Rinuccio, having little leisure for deliberation, let Alessandro fall, and took to flight as fast as his legs might carry him. Alessandro, albeit encumbered by the grave clothes, which were very long, also jumped up and made off. By the light shown by the patrol the lady had very plainly perceived Rinuccio, with Alessandro on his back, as also that Alessandro had the grave clothes upon him, and much did she marvel at the daring of both, but, for all that, she laughed heartily to see Rinuccio drop Alessandro, and Alessandro run away. Overjoyed at the turn the affair had taken, and praising God that he had rid her of her harass, she withdrew from the window and betook her to her chamber, averring of her maid that for certain they must be mightily in love with her, seeing that 'twas plain they had both done her bidding. Crestfallen, and cursing his evil fortune, Rinuccio nevertheless went not home, but as soon as the street was clear of the patrol, came back to the spot where he had dropped Alessandro, and stooped down and began feeling about, if haply he might find him, and so do his devoir to the lady. But as he found him not, he supposed the patrol must have borne him thence, and so at last home he went, as did also Alessandro, knowing not what else to do, and deploring his mishap. On the morrow, Scanario's tomb being open and empty, for Alessandro had thrown the corpse into the vault below, all Pistoia debated of the matter with no small diversity of opinion, the fools believing that Scannario had been carried off by devils. Neither of the lovers, however, forbore to make suit to the lady for her favour and love, telling her what he had done, and what had happened, and praying her to have him excused that he had not perfectly carried out her instructions. But she, feigning to believe neither of them, disposed of each with the same curt answer, to wit, that, as he had not done her bidding, she would never do aught for him. End of Day 9. The first story. Read by J.C. Guan, January 2009.
Day 9, the second story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by J.M. Rigg. Day 9, the second story. An abbess rises in haste and in the dark, with intent to surprise an accused nun abed with her lover. Thinking to put on her veil, she puts on instead the breeches of a priest that she has with her. The nun, espying her headgear, and doing her to wit thereof, is acquitted, and thenceforth finds it easier to foregather with her lover.
So ended Philomela, and when all had commended the address shown by the lady in ridding herself of the two lovers that she affected not, and contrariwise had censured the hardihood of the two lovers as not love but madness, the queen turned to Elisa, and with a charming air, "Now, Elisa, follow," quoth she, whereupon Elisa began on this wise.
Dearest ladies, 'twas cleverly done of Madonna Francesca to disembarrass herself in the way we have heard, but I have to tell of a young nun who by a happy retort and the favor of fortune delivered herself from imminent peril. And as you know that there are not a few most foolish folk who, notwithstanding their folly, take upon themselves the governance and correction of others, so you may learn from my story that fortune at times justly puts them to shame, which befell the abbess, who was the superior of the nun of whom I am about to speak. You are to know then that in a convent in Lombardy of very great repute for strict and holy living there was, among other ladies that there wore the veil, a young woman of noble family and extraordinary beauty. Now Isabetta, for such was her name, having speech one day of one of her kinsmen at the grate, became enamored of a fine young gallant that was with him, who, seeing her to be very fair, and reading her passion in her eyes, was kindled with a like flame for her, which mutual and unsolaced love they bore a great while, not without great suffering to both. But at length, both being intent thereon, the gallant discovered a way by which he might with all secrecy visit his nun, and she approving, he paid her not one visit only, but many, to their no small mutual solace. But while thus they continued their intercourse, it so befell that one night one of the sisters observed him take his leave of Isabetta and depart, albeit neither he nor she was aware that they had thus been discovered. The sister imparted what she had seen to several others. At first they were minded to denounce her to the abbess, one Madonna Usimbalda, who was reputed by the nuns, and indeed by all that knew her, to be a good and holy woman. But on second thoughts they deemed it expedient, that there might be no room for denial, to cause the abbess to take her and the gallant in the act. So they held their peace, and arranged between them to keep her in watch and close espial, that they might catch her unawares. Of which practice Isabetta witting not, it so befell that one night, when she had her lover to see her, the sisters that were on the watch were soon ware of it, and at what they deemed the nick of time, parted into two companies, of which one mounted guard at the threshold of Isabetta's cell, while the other hasted to the abbess's chamber, and knocking at the door, roused her, and as soon as they heard her voice, said, "Up, madam, without a delay. We have discovered that Isabetta has a young man with her in her cell." Now that night the abbess had with her a priest whom she used not seldom to have conveyed to her in a chest, and the report of the sisters making her apprehensive lest for excess of zeal and hurry they should force the door open, she rose in a trice, and huddling on her clothes as best she might in the dark, instead of the veil that they wear, which they call the psalter, she caught up the priest's breeches, and having clapped them on her head, hid her forth, and locked the door behind her, saying, "Where is this woman accursed of God?" And so, guided by the sisters, also agog to catch Isabetta a sinning, that they perceived not what manner of headgear the abbess wore, she made her way to the cell, and with their aid broke open the door, and entering they found the two lovers abed in one another's arms, who, as it were, thunderstruck to be thus surprised, lay there witting not what to do. The sisters took the young nun forthwith, and by command of the abbess brought her to the chapter house. The gallant, left behind in the cell, put on his clothes, and waited to see how the affair would end, being minded to make as many nuns as he might come at pay dearly for any despite that might be done his mistress, and to bring her off with him. The abbess, seated in the chapter house with all her nuns about her, and all eyes bent upon the culprit, began giving her the severest reprimand that ever woman got, for that by her disgraceful and abominable conduct, should it get wind, she had sullied the fair fame of the convent. Whereto she added menaces most dire. Shamefast and timorous, the culprit essayed no defence, and her silence begat pity of her in the rest. But while the abbess waxed more and more voluble, it chanced that the girl raised her head and espied the abbess's headgear, and the points that hung down on this side and that. The significance whereof being by no means lost upon her, she quite plucked up heart, and, "Madam," quoth she, "so help you God, tie up your coif, and then you may say what you will to me." Whereto the abbess, not understanding her, replied, "What coif, lewd woman? So thou hast the effrontery to jest? Think'st thou that what thou hast done is a matter meet for jests?" Whereupon, "Madam," quoth the girl again, I pray you tie up your coif, and then you may say to me whatever you please." Which occasioned not a few of the nuns to look up at the abbess's head, and the abbess herself to raise her hands thereto, and so she and they at one and the same time apprehended Isabetta's meaning. Wherefore the abbess, finding herself detected by all in the same sin, and that no disguise was possible, changed her tone, and held quite another sort of language than before, the upshot of which was that 'twas impossible to withstand the assaults of the flesh, and that, accordingly, observing due secrecy as theretofore, all might give themselves a good time as they had opportunity. So having dismissed Isabetta to rejoin her lover in her cell, she herself returned to lie with her priest. And many a time thereafter, in spite of the envious Isabetta, had her gallant to see her, the others, that lacked lovers, doing in secret the best they might to push their fortunes. End of Day 9, the second story.
Day 9, Section 3 of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 9, the third story. Master Simone, at the instance of Bruno and Buffalmacco and Nello, makes Caladrino believe that he is with child. Caladrino accordingly gives them capons and money for medicines, and is cured without being delivered.
When Elisa had ended the story, and all had given thanks to God that he had vouchsafed the young nun a happy escape from the fangs of her envious companions, the queen bade Philostrato follow suit, and without expecting a second command, thus Philostrato began.
Fairest my ladies, the uncouth judge from the marches, or whom I told you yesterday, took from the tip of my tongue a story of Caladrino, which I was on the point of narrating, and as naught can be said of him without mightily enhancing our jollity, albeit not a little has already been said touching him and his comrades, I will now give you the story which I had meant yesterday to give you. Who there were this Caladrino, and the others that I am to tell of in this story, has already been sufficiently explained. Wherefore, without much ado, I say that one of Caladrino's aunts having died, leaving him 200 pounds in petty cash, Caladrino gave out that he was minded to purchase an estate, and, as if he had 10,000 florins of gold to invest, engaged every broker in Florence to treat for him, the negotiation always falling through as soon as the price was named. Bruno and Buffalmacco, knowing what was afoot, told him again and again that he better give himself a jolly time with them than go about buying earth as if he must need make pellets. But so far were they from effecting their purpose that they could not even prevail upon him to give them a single meal. Whereat, as one day they grumbled, being joined by a comrade of theirs, one Nello, also a painter, they all three took counsel how they might wet their whistle at Caladrino's expense, and their plans soon being concerted, the next morning Caladrino was scarce gone out when Nello met him, saying, "Good day, Caladrino." Whereto Caladrino replied, "God give thee a good day and a good year." Nello then drew back a little, and looking him steadily in the face until, "What seest thou to stare at?" quoth Caladrino. "Thou hadst no pain in the night?" returned Nello. "Thou seemest not thyself to me." Which Caladrino no sooner heard than he began to be disquieted, and, "Alas! how sayest thou?" quoth he. "What takest thou to be the matter with me?" "Why, as to that I have nothing to say," returned Nello, "but thou seemest to be quite changed. Perchance 'tis not what I suppose." And with that he left him. Caladrino, anxious, though he could not in the least have said why, went on, and soon Buffalmacco was not far off, and had observed him part from Nello, made up to him and greeted him, asking him if he was not in pain. "I cannot say," replied Caladrino, 'Twas but now that Nello told me that I looked quite changed. Can it be that there is aught the matter with me?" "Aught?" quoth Buffalmacco. "Ay, indeed, there might be a trifle the matter with thee. Thou lookest to be half dead, man." Calandrino now began to think he must have a fever. Then up came Bruno, and the first thing he said was, "Why, Calandrino, how ill thou lookest! Thy appearance is that of a corpse. How dost thou feel?" To be thus accosted by all three left no doubt in Calandrino's mind that he was ill, and so, "What shall I do?" quoth he, in a great fright. "My advice," replied Bruno, "is that thou go home, and get thee to bed, and cover thee well up, and send thy water to Master Simone, who, as thou knowest, is such a friend of ours. He will tell thee at once what thou must do, and we will come to see thee, and will do aught that may be needful." And Nello then joining them, they all three went home with Calandrino, who, now quite spent, went straight to his room, and said to his wife, "Come now, wrap me up well, I feel very ill." And so he laid himself on the bed, and sent a maid with his water to Master Simone, who had then his shop in the Mercato Vecchio, at the sign of the Pumpkin. Whereupon quoth Bruno to his comrades, "You will stay here with him, and I will go hear what the doctor has to say, and if need be will bring him hither." "Prithee do so, my friend," quoth Calandrino, "and bring me word how it is with me, for I feel as how I cannot say in my inside." So Bruno hied him to Master Simone, and before the maid arrived with the water, told him what was afoot. The master, thus primed, inspected the water, and then said to the maid, "Go tell Calandrino to keep himself very warm. I will come at once, and let him know what is the matter with him, and what he must do." With which message the maid was scarce returned, when the master and Bruno arrived, and the master, having seated himself beside Calandrino, felt his pulse, and by, in the presence of his wife, said, "Harkee, Calandrino, I will speak to thee as a friend, and I tell thee that what is amiss with thee is just that thou art with child." Whereupon Calandrino cried out querulously, "Woe's me! 'Tis thy doing, Tessa, for thou must needs be uppermost. I told thee plainly what would come of it." Whereat the lady, being not a little modest, colored from brow to neck, and with downcast eyes withdrew from the room, saying never a word by way of answer. Calandrino ran on the same plaintive stream. "Alas! woe's me! What shall I do? How shall I be delivered of this child? What passage can it find? Ah! I see only too plainly that the lasciviousness of this wife of mine has been the death of me. God make her wretched, as I would fain be happy. Were I as well as I am not, I would get me up and thrash her, till I left not a whole bone in her body. Albeit it does but serve me right for letting her get the upper place. But if I win through this, she will never have it again. Verily she might pine to death for it, but she should not have it." Which to hear, Bruno and Buffalmacco and Nello were like to burst with suppressed laughter, and Master Schimione laughed so frantically that all his teeth were ready to start from his jaws. However, at length, an answer to Calandrino's appeals and entreaties for counsel and succor. "Calandrino," quoth the master, "thou mayest dismiss thy fears, for, God be praised, we are apprised of thy state in such good time, that with but little trouble, in the course of a few days I shall set thee right, but 'twill cost a little." "Woe's me!" returned Calandrino. "Be it so, master, for the love of God. I have here 200 pounds, with which I had thoughts of buying an estate. Take them, all, if you must have all, so only I may escape being delivered, for I know not how I should manage it, seeing that women, albeit 'tis much easier for them, do make such a noise in the hour of their labor, that I misdoubt me if I suffered so, I should die before I was delivered." "Disquiet not thyself," said the doctor. "I have a potion distilled for thee, of rare virtue it is, and not a little palatable, and in the course of 3 days 'twill purge thee of all, and leave thee in better fettle than a fish. But thou wilt do well to be careful thereafter, and commit no such indiscretions again. Now, to make this potion we must have 3 pair of good fat capons, and for divers other ingredients thou wilt give one of thy friends here 5 pounds in small change to purchase them, and thou wilt have everything sent to my shop, and so, please God, I will send thee this distilled potion tomorrow morning, and thou wilt have a good beakerful each time. Whereupon, be it as you bid, master mine, quoth Caladrino, and handing Bruno £5 and money enough to purchase 3 pair of capons, he begged him, if it were not too much trouble, to do him the service to buy these things for him. So away went the doctor, and made a little decoction by way of draught, and sent it to him. Bruno bought the capons, and everything else that was needful to furnish the feast, with which he and his comrades and the doctor regaled them. Caladrino drank of the decoction for 3 mornings, after which he had a visit from his friends and the doctor, who felt his pulse, and then, "Beyond a doubt, Caladrino," quoth he, "thou art cured, and so thou hast no more occasion to keep indoors, but needest have no fear to do whatever thou hast a mind to do." Much relieved, Caladrino got up, and resumed his accustomed way of life, and wherever he found any one to talk to, was loud in praise of Master Simone for the excellent manner in which he had cured him, causing him in 3 days, without the least suffering, to be quit of his pregnancy. And Bruno and Buffalmacco and Nello was not a little pleased with themselves that they had so cleverly got the better of Caladrino's niggardliness, albeit Monna Tessa, who was not deceived, murmured not a little against her husband. End of Day 9, the 3rd story.
Day 9, the 4th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J.M. Rigg. Day 9, the 4th story. Cecco, son of Messer Fortarigo, loses his all at play at Buonconvento, besides the money of Cecco, son of Messer Anguilieri, whom, running after him in his shirt and crying out that he has robbed him, he causes to be taken by peasants. He then puts on his clothes, mounts his palfrey, and leaves him to follow in his shirt.
All the company laughed beyond measure to hear what Calandrino said touching his wife. But when Philostrato had done, Nephila, being bidden by the queen, thus began.
Noble ladies, were it not more difficult for men to evince their good sense and virtue than their folly and their vice, many would labour in vain to set bounds to their flow of words, whereof you have had a most conspicuous example in poor blundering Calandrino, who, for the better cure of that with which in his simplicity he supposed himself to be afflicted, had no sort of need to discover in public his wife's secret pleasures. Which affair has brought to my mind one that fell out contrariwise, inasmuch as the guile of one discomfited the good sense of another, to the grievous loss and shame of the discomfited, the manner whereof I am minded to relate to you. 'Tis not many years since there were in Siena 2 young men, both of age, and both alike named Cecco, the one being son of Messer Anguilieri, the other of Messer Fortarigo, who, albeit in many other respects their dispositions accorded ill, agreed so well in one, to wit that they both hated their fathers, that they became friends, and kept much together. Now Anguilieri, being a pretty fellow and well-mannered, could not brook to live at Siena on the allowance made him by his father, and learning that there was come into the March of Ancona, as legate of the Pope, a cardinal to whom he was much bounden, resolved to resort to him there, thinking thereby to improve his circumstances. So, having acquainted his father with his purpose, he prevailed upon him to give him there and then all that he would have given him during the next 6 months, that he might have the wherewith to furnish himself with apparel and a good mount, so as to travel in a becoming manner. And as he was looking out for some one to attend him as his servant, Fortarigo, hearing of it, came presently to him, and besought him with all earnestness to take him with him as his groom or servant, or what he would, and he would be satisfied with his keep, without any salary whatsoever. Whereto Anguillieri made answer that he was not disposed to take him, not but that he well knew that he was competent for any service that might be required of him, but because he was given to play, and therewithal would at times get drunk. Fortarigo assured him with many an oath that he would be on his guard to commit neither fault, and added thereto such instant entreaties that Anguillieri was, as it were, vanquished, and consented. So one morning they took the road for Buonconvento, being minded there to breakfast. Now when Anguillieri had breakfasted, as 'twas a very hot day, he had a bed made in the inn, and having undressed with Fortarigo's help, he composed himself to sleep, telling Fortarigo to call him on the stroke of 9. Anguillieri thus sleeping, Fortarigo repaired to the tavern, where, having slaked his thirst, he sat down to a game with some that were there, who speedily won from him all his money, and thereafter in like manner all the clothes he had on his back. Wherefore he, being anxious to retrieve his losses, went, stripped as he was to his shirt, to the room where lay Anguillieri, and seeing that he was sound asleep, he took from his purse all the money that he had, and so went back to the gaming table and staked it, and lost it all as he had his own. By and by Anguillieri woke, and got up and dressed, and called for Fortarigo, and as Fortarigo answered not, he supposed that he must have had too much to drink, and be sleeping it off somewhere, as was his wont. He accordingly determined to leave him alone, and doubting not to find a better servant at Corsignano, he let saddle his palfrey and attach the valise. But when, being about to depart, he would have paid the host, never a coin could he come by, whereat there was no small stir, so that all the inn was in an uproar, Anguillieri averring that he had been robbed in the house, and threatening to have them all arrested and taken to Siena. When lo, who should make his appearance but Fortarigo in his shirt, intent now to steal the clothes as he had stolen the moneys of Anguillieri. And marking that Anguillieri was accoutred for the road, "How is this, Anguillieri?" quoth he. "Are we to start so soon?" "Nay, but wait a little. One will be here presently that has my doublet in pawn for 38 soldi. I doubt not that he will return it me for 35 soldi if I pay money down." And while they were yet talking, in came one that made it plain to Anguillieri that 'twas Fortarigo that had robbed him of his money, for he told him the amount that Fortarigo had lost. Whereat Anguillieri, in a towering passion, rated Fortarigo right soundly, and but that he stood more in fear of man than of God, would have suited action to word. And so, threatening to have him hanged by the neck and proclaimed an outlaw at the gallows tree of Siena, he mounted his horse. Fortarigo, making as if 'twas not to him but to another that Anguillieri thus spoke, made answer, "Come now, Anguillieri, we were best have done with all this idle talk, and consider the matter of substance. We can redeem for 35 soldi if we pay forthwith, but if we wait till tomorrow, we shall not get off with less than 38, the full amount of the loan, and 'tis because I staked by his advice that he will make me this allowance. Now why should not we save these 3 soldi?" Whereat Anguillieri waxed well nigh desperate, more particularly that he marked that the bystanders were scanning him suspiciously, as if, so far from understanding that Fortarigo had staked and lost his, Anguillieri's, money, they gave him credit for still being in funds. So he cried out, "What have I to do with thy doublet? 'Tis high time thou wast hanged by the neck, that, not content with robbing me and gambling away my money, thou must needs also keep me in parley here, and make mock of me, when I would fain be gone." Fortorigo, however, still persisted in making believe that Anguillieri did not mean this for him, and only said, "Nay, but why wilt not thou save me these 3 soldi? Think'st thou I can be of no more use to thee? Prithee, an thou lovest me, do me this turn. Wherefore in such a hurry? We have time enough to get to Torrenieri this evening. Come now, out with thy purse. Thou knowest I might search Siena through, and not find a doublet that would suit me so well as this, and for all I let him have it for 38 soldi, 'tis worth 40 or more, so thou wilt wrong me twice over." Vexed beyond measure that after robbing him Fortorigo should now keep him clavering about the matter, Anguillieri made no answer, but turned his horse's head and took the road for Torrenieri. But Fortorigo, with cunning malice, trotted after him in his shirt, and 'twas still his doublet, that he would have of him. And when they had thus ridden 2 good miles, and Anguillieri was forcing the pace to get out of earshot of his pestering, Fortorigo espied some husbandmen in a field beside the road, a little ahead of Anguillieri, and fell a shouting to them amain, "Take thief! Take thief!" Whereupon they came up with their spades and their mattocks, and barred Anguillieri's way, supposing that he must have robbed the man that came shouting after him in his shirt, and stopped him and apprehended him, and little indeed did it avail him to tell them who he was, and how the matter stood, for up came Fortorigo with a wrathful air, and "I know not," quoth he, "why I spare to kill thee on the spot, traitor, thief that thou art, thus to despoil me and give me the slip." And then, turning to the peasants, "You see, gentlemen," quoth he, "in what a trim he left me in the inn, after gambling away all that he had with him and on him. Well, indeed, may I say that under God 'tis to you I owe it that I have thus come by my own again, for which cause I shall ever be beholden to you." Anguillieri also had his say, but his words passed unheeded. Fortorigo, with the help of the peasants, compelled him to dismount, and having stripped him, donned his clothes, mounted his horse, and leaving him barefoot and in his shirt, rode back to Siena, giving out on all hands that he had won the palfrey and the clothes from Anguillieri. So Anguillieri, having thought to present himself to the cardinal in the march a wealthy man, returned to Buonconvento poor and in his shirt, and being ashamed for the time to show himself in Siena, pledged the nag that Fortorigo had ridden for a suit of clothes, and betook him to his kinsfolk at Corsignano, where he tarried until he received a fresh supply of money from his father. Thus, then, Fortorigo's guile disconcerted Anguillieri's judicious purpose, albeit when time and occasion served, it was not left unrequited. End of Day 9, the 4th story. Recording by Ruth Golding.
Day 9, the 5th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gesine. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 9, the 5th story. Calandrino being enamoured of a damsel, Bruno gives him a scroll, averring that if he but touch her therewith, she will go with him. He is found with her by his wife, who subjects him to a most severe and vexatious examination.
So, at no great length, ended Neifile her story, which the company allowed to pass with none too much laughter or remark, whereupon the queen, turning to Fiametta, bade her follow suit. Fiametta, with mien most gladsome, made answer that she willingly obeyed, and thus began.
As I doubt not ye know, ladies most debonair, be the topic of discourse never so well worn, it will still continue to please, if the speaker knows how to make due choice of time and occasion meet. Wherefore, considering the reason for which we are here, how that 'tis to make merry and speed the time gaily, and that merely, I deem that there is naught that may afford us mirth and solace, but here may find time and occasion meet, and, after serving 1,000 turns of discourse, should still prove not unpleasing for another 1,000. Wherefore, notwithstanding that of Calandrino and his doings not a little has from time to time been said among us, yet considering that, as a while ago Philostrato observed, there is naught that concerns him that is not entertaining, I will make bold to add to the preceding stories another, which I might well, had I been minded to deviate from the truth, have disguised, and so recounted it to you, under other names. But as whoso in telling a story diverges from the truth, does thereby in no small measure diminish the delight of his hearers, and I purpose for the reason aforesaid to give you the narrative in proper form. Niccolo Cornacchini, one of our citizens and a man of wealth, had among other estates a fine one at Camerata, on which he had a grand house built, and engaged Bruno and Buffalmacco to paint it throughout, in which task, for that 'twas by no means light, they associated with them Nello and Calandrino, and so set to work. There were a few rooms in the house provided with beds and other furniture, and an old female servant lived there as caretaker. But otherwise the house was unoccupied, for which course Niccolo's son, Filippo, being a young man and a bachelor, was wont sometimes to bring thither a woman for his pleasure, and after keeping her there for a few days, to escort her thence again. Now on one of these occasions it befell that he brought thither one Nicolosa, whom a vile fellow, named Mangione, kept in a house at Camaldoli as a common prostitute. And a fine piece of flesh she was, and wore fine clothes, and, for one of her sort, knew how to comport herself becomingly, and talk agreeably. Now one day at high noon, forth tripped the damsel from her chamber in a white gown, her locks braided about her head, to wash her hands and face at a well that was in the courtyard of the house. And while she was so engaged, it befell that Calandrino came there for water, and greeted her familiarly. Having returned his salutation, she, rather because Calandrino struck her as something out of the common than for any other interest she felt in him, regarded him attentively. Calandrino did the like by her, and being smitten by her beauty, found reasons enough why he should not go back to his comrades with the water, but as he knew not who she was, he made not bold to address her. She, upon whom his gaze was not lost, being minded to amuse herself at his expense, let her glance from time to time rest upon him, while she heaved a slight sigh or two. Whereby Calandrino was forthwith captivated, and tarried in the courtyard, until Filippo called her back into the chamber. Returned to his work, Calandrino sighed like a furnace, which Bruno, who was ever regardful of his doings for the diversion they afforded him, failed not to mark, and by, "What the devil is amiss with thee, comrade Calandrino?" quoth he. "Thou dost naught but puff and blow." "Comrade," replied Calandrino, "I should be in luck, had I but one to help me." "How so?" quoth Bruno. "Why," returned Calandrino, "'tis not to go farther, but there is a damsel below, fairer than a Lamia, and so mightily in love with me that 'twould astonish thee. I observed it but now, when I went to fetch the water." "Nay, but, Calandrino, make sure she be not Filippo's wife," quoth Bruno. "I doubt 'tis even so," replied Calandrino, "for he called her and she joined him in the chamber, but what signifies it? I would circumvent Christ himself in such a case, not to say Filippo. Of a truth, comrade, I tell thee she pleases me, I could not say how." "Comrade," returned Bruno, "I will find out for thee who she is, and if she be Filippo's wife, 2 words from me will make it straight for thee, for she is much my friend. But how shall we prevent Buffalmacco knowing it? I can never have a word with her, but he is with me." "As to Buffalmacco," replied Calandrino, "I care not if he do know, but let us make sure it come not to Nello's ears, for he is of kin to Monna Tessa, and would spoil it all." "Whereto? Thou art in the right," returned Bruno. Now Bruno knew who the damsel was, for he had seen her arrive, and moreover Filippo had told him. So, Calandrino having given over working for a while, and betaken him to her, Bruno acquainted Nello and Buffalmacco with the whole story, and thereupon they privily concerted how to entreat him in regard of his love affair. Wherefore, upon his return, quoth Bruno softly, "Didst see her?" "Ay, woe's me," replied Calandrino, "she has stricken me to the death." Quoth Bruno, "I will go see if she be the lady I take her to be, and if I find that 'tis so, leave the rest to me." Whereupon down went Bruno, and found Filippo and the damsel, and fully apprised them what sort of fellow Calandrino was, and what he had told them, and concerted with them what each should do and say, that they might have a merry time together over Calandrino's love affair. He then rejoined Calandrino, saying, "'Tis the very same, and therefore the affair needs very delicate handling, for, if Filippo were but ware thereof, not all Arno's waters would suffice to cleanse us. However, what should I say to her from thee, if by chance I should get speech of her?" "I' faith," replied Calandrino. "Why, first of all, thou wilt tell her that I wish her 1,000 bushels of the good seed of generation, and then that I am her servant, and if she is fain of aught, thou takest me?" "Ay," quoth Bruno, "leave it to me." Supper time came, and the day's work done, they went down into the courtyard, Filippo and Nicolosa being there, and there they tarried a while to advance Calandrino's suit. Calandrino's gaze was soon riveted on Nicolosa, and so strange and startling were the gestures that he made, that they would have given sight to the blind. She, on her part, used all her arts to inflame his passion, primed as she had been by Bruno, and diverted beyond measure as she was by Calandrino's antics, while Filippo, Buffalmacco, and the rest feigned to be occupied in converse, and to see naught of what passed. However, after a while, to Calandrino's extreme disgust, they took their leave, and as they bent their steps towards Florence, "I warrant thee," quoth Bruno to Calandrino, "she wastes away for thee like ice in the sunlight. By the body o' God, if thou wert to bring thy rebeck, and sing to her one or two of thy love songs, she'd throw herself out of the window to be with thee." Quoth Calandrino, "Think'st thou, comrade, think'st thou, 'twere well I brought it?" "Ay, indeed," returned Bruno. Whereupon, "Ah, comrade," quoth Calandrino, "so thou wouldst not believe me when I told thee to-day. Of a truth I perceive there's ne'er another knows so well what he would be at as I. Who but I would have known how so soon to win the love of a lady like that? Lucky indeed might they deem themselves if they did it. Those young gallants that go about, day and night, up and down, a-strumming on the eye-stringed viol, and would not know how to gather a handful of nuts once in a millennium. Mayst thou be by, to see when I bring her the rebeck? Thou wilt see fine sport. List well what I say, I am not so old as I look, and she knows it right well, ay, and anyhow, I will soon let her know it, when I come to grapple her. By the very body of Christ, I will have such sport with her, that she will follow me as any love-sick maid follows her swain." "Oh," quoth Bruno, "I doubt not thou wilt make her thy prey, and I seem to see thee bite her dainty vermeil mouth, and her cheeks, that show as twin roses, with thy teeth, that are as so many lute pegs, and afterwards devour her bodily." So encouraged, Calandrino fancied himself already in action, and went about singing and capering in such high glee that 'twas as if he would burst his skin. And so next day he brought the rebeck, and to the no small amusement of all the company sang several songs to her. And in short, by frequently seeing her, he waxed so mad with passion that he gave over working, and 1,000 times a day he would run now to the window, now to the door, and anon to the courtyard, in the chance of catching sight of her. Nor did she, astutely following Bruno's instructions, fail to afford him abundance of opportunity. Bruno played the go-between, bearing him her answers to all his messages, and sometimes bringing him messages from her. When she was not at home, which was most frequently the case, he would send him letters from her, in which she gave great encouragement to his hopes, at the same time giving him to understand that she was at the house of her kinsfolk, where as yet he might not visit her. On this wise, Bruno and Buffalmacco so managed the affair as to divert themselves inordinately, causing him to send her, as at her request, now an ivory comb, now a purse, now a little knife, and other such dainty trifles, in return for which they brought him, now and again, a counterfeit ring of no value, with which Calandrino was marvellously pleased. And Calandrino, to stimulate their zeal in his interest, would entertain them hospitably at table, and otherwise flatter them. Now, when they had thus kept him in play for 2 good months, and the affair was just where it had been, Calandrino, seeing that the work was coming to an end, and bethinking him that, if it did so before he had brought his love affair to a successful issue, he must give up all hopes of ever doing so, began to be very instant and importunate with Bruno. So in the presence of the damsel, and by preconcert with her and Filippo, quoth Bruno to Calandrino, "Harkye, comrade, this lady has vowed to me 1,000 times that she will do as thou wouldst have her, and as, for all that, she does naught to pleasure thee, I am of opinion that she leads thee by the nose. Wherefore, as she keeps not her promises, we will make her do so, willy-nilly, if thou art so minded." "Nay, but for the love of God, so be it," replied Calandrino, "and that speedily." "Darest thou touch her, then, with a scroll that I shall give thee?" quoth Bruno. "I dare," replied Calandrino. "Fetch me, then," quoth Bruno, "a bit of skin of an unborn lamb, a live bat, 3 grains of incense, and a blessed candle, and leave the rest to me." To catch the bat taxed all Calandrino's art and craft for the whole of the evening, but having at length taken him, he brought him with the other matters to Bruno, who, having withdrawn into a room by himself, wrote on the skin some cabalistic jargon, and handed it to him, saying, "Know, Calandrino, that if thou touch her with this scroll, she will follow thee forthwith, and do whatever thou shalt wish. Wherefore, should Filippo go abroad to-day, get thee somehow up to her, and touch her, and then go into the barn that is hereby, 'tis the best place we have, for never a soul goes there, and thou wilt see that she will come there too. When she is there, thou wottest well what to do." Calandrino, overjoyed as ne'er another, took the scroll, saying only, "Comrade, leave that to me." Now Nello, whom Calandrino mistrusted, entered with no less zest than the others into the affair, and was their confederate for Calandrino's discomfiture. Accordingly, by Bruno's direction, he hied to Florence, and finding Monna Tessa, "Thou hast scarce forgotten, Tessa," quoth he, "what a beating Calandrino gave thee, without the least cause, that day when he came home with the stones from Mugnone, for which I would have thee be avenged, and so thou wilt not. Call me no more kinsman or friend. He has fallen in love with the lady up there, who is abandoned enough to go closeting herself not seldom with him, and 'tis but a short while since they made assignation to foregather forthwith. So I would have thee go there, and surprise him in the act, and give him a sound trouncing." Which when the lady heard, she deemed it no laughing matter, but started up and broke out with, Alas, the arrant knave! Is't thus he treats me? By the holy rood, never fear but I will pay him out. And wrapping herself in her cloak, and taking a young woman with her for companion, she sped more at a run than at a walk, escorted by Nello, up to Camerata. Bruno, espying her from afar, said to Filippo, "Lo, here comes our friend." Whereupon Filippo went to the place where Calandrino and the others were at work, and said, "My masters, I must needs go at once to Florence. Slacken not on that account." And so off he went, and hid himself where, unobserved, he might see what Calandrino would do. Calandrino waited only until he saw that Filippo was at some distance, and then he went down into the courtyard, where he found Nicolosa alone, and fell a-talking with her. She, knowing well what she had to do, drew close to him, and showed him a little more familiarity than she was wont, whereupon Calandrino touched her with a scroll, and having done so, saying never a word, bent his steps towards the barn, whither Nicolosa followed him, and, being entered, shut the door, and forthwith embraced him, threw him down on the straw that lay there, and got astride of him, and holding him fast by the arms about the shoulders, suffered him not to approach his face to hers, but gazing upon him as if he were the delight of her heart. "O Calandrino, sweet my Calandrino," quoth she, "heart of my body, my very soul, my bliss, my consolation! Oh, how long have I yearned to hold thee in my arms, and to have thee all my own! Thy endearing ways have utterly disarmed me, thou hast made prize of my heart with thy rebeck. Do I indeed hold thee in mine embrace?" Calandrino, scarce able to move, murmured, "Ah, sweet my soul, suffer me to kiss thee." Whereto, "Nay, but thou art too hasty," replied Nicolosa. "Let me first feast mine eyes on thee, let me but sate them with this sweet face of thine." Meanwhile Bruno and Buffalmacco had joined Filippo, so what passed was seen and heard by all three. And while Calandrino was thus intent to kiss Nicolosa, lo, up came Nello with Monna Tessa. "By God, I swear they are both there!" ejaculated Nello, as they entered the doorway; but the lady, now fairly furious, laid hold of him and thrust him aside, and rushing in espied Nicolosa astride of Calandrino. Nicolosa no sooner caught sight of the lady than up she jumped, and in a trice was beside Filippo. Monna Tessa fell upon Calandrino, who was still on the floor, planted her nails in his face and scratched it all over. She then seized him by the hair, and hailing him to and fro about the barn, "Foul, pestilent cur," quoth she, "is this the way thou treatest me? Thou old fool! A murrain on the love I have borne thee! Hast thou not enough to do at home, that thou must needs go falling in love with strange women? And a fine lover thou wouldst make! Dost not thou know thyself, knave? Thou from whose body 'twere not possible to wring enough sap for a sauce. God's faith, 'twas not Tessa that got thee with child. God's curse on her, whoever she was! Verily she must be a poor creature to be enamoured of a jewel of thy rare quality." At sight of his wife, Calandrino, suspended as it were between life and death, ventured no defence; but, his face torn to shreds, his hair and clothes all disordered, fumbled about for his capuche, which having found, up he got, and humbly besought his wife not to publish the matter, unless she were minded that he should be cut to pieces, for that she that was with him was the wife of the master of the house. "Then God give her a bad year," replied the lady. Whereupon Bruno and Buffalmacco, who by this time had laughed their fill with Filippo and Nicolosa, came up as if attracted by the noise, and after not a little ado pacified the lady, and counselled Calandrino to go back to Florence and stay there, lest Filippo should get wind of the affair, and do him a mischief. So Calandrino, crestfallen and woebegone, got him back to Florence with his face torn to shreds, where, daring not to show himself at Camerata again, he endured day and night the grievous torment of his wife's vituperation. Such was the issue to which, after ministering not a little mirth to his comrades, and also to Nicolosa and Filippo, this ardent lover brought his amour. End of Day 9. The 5th story.
Day 9, the 6th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Eugene Smith. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 9, the 6th story. 2 young men lodge at an inn, of whom the one lies with the host's daughter, his wife by inadvertence lying with the other. He that lay with the daughter afterwards gets into her father's bed and tells him all, taking him to be his comrade. They bandy words, whereupon the good woman, apprehending the circumstances, gets her to bed with her daughter, and by divers apt words re-establishes perfect accord.
Calandrino, as on former occasions, so also on this, moved the company to laughter. However, when the ladies had done talking of his doings, the queen called for a story from Pamphilo, who thus spoke.
Worshipful ladies, this Nicolosa that Calandrino loved has brought to my mind a story of another Nicolosa, which I am minded to tell you, because 'twill show you how a good woman, by her quick apprehension, avoided a great scandal. In the plain of Mugnone, there was not long ago a good man that furnished travellers with meat and drink for money, and, for that he was in poor circumstances, and had but a little house, gave not lodging to every comer, but only to a few that he knew, and if they were hard bested. Now the good man had to wife a very fine woman, and by her had 2 children, to wit, a pretty and winsome girl of some 15 or 16 summers, as yet unmarried, and a little boy, not yet 1 year old, whom the mother suckled at her own breast. The girl had found favour in the eyes of a goodly and mannerly young gentleman of our city, who was not seldom in those parts, and loved her to the point of passion. And she, being mightily flattered to be loved by such a gallant, studied how to comport herself so debonairly as to retain his regard, and while she did so, grew likewise enamoured of him. And divers times, by consent of both, their love had had its fruition. But that Pinocchio, such was the gallant's name, shrank from the disgrace that 'twould bring upon the girl and himself alike. But, as his passion daily waxed apace, Pinocchio, yearning to find himself abed with her, bethought him that he were best contrived to lodge with her father, deeming, from what he knew of her father's economy, that if he did so, he might effect his purpose, and never a soul be the wiser, which idea no sooner struck him than he set about carrying it into effect. So, late one evening, Pinocchio and a trusted comrade, Adriano by name, to whom he had confided his love, hired 2 nags, and having set upon them 2 valises, filled with straw or such like stuff, sallied forth of Florence, and rode by a circuitous route to the plain of Mugnone, which they reached after nightfall. And having fetched a compass, so that it might seem as if they were coming from Romagna, they rode up to the good man's house and knocked at the door. The good man, knowing them both very well, opened to them forthwith, whereupon, "Thou must even put us up to-night," quoth Pinocchio. "We thought to get into Florence, but for all the speed we could make, we are but arrived here, as thou seest, at this hour." "Pinocchio," replied the host, "thou well knowest that I can make but a sorry shift to lodge gentlemen like you. But yet, as night has overtaken you here, and time serves not to betake you elsewhere, I will gladly give you such accommodation as I may." The 2 gallants then dismounted and entered the inn, and having first looked to their horses, brought out some supper that they had carried with them, and supped with the host. Now the host had but one little bedroom, in which were 3 beds, set, as conveniently as he could contrive, 2 on one side of the room, and the third on the opposite side, but for all that there was scarce room enough to pass through. The host had the least discomfortable of the 3 beds made up for the 2 friends, and having quartered them there some little while afterwards, both being awake, but feigning to be asleep, he caused his daughter to get into one of the other 2 beds, while he and his wife took their places in the third, the good woman setting the cradle, in which was her little boy, beside the bed. Such then being the partition made of the beds, Pinocchio, who had taken exact note thereof, waited only until he deemed all but himself to be asleep, and then got softly up and stole to the bed in which lay his beloved, and laid himself beside her. And she according him albeit a timorous yet a gladsome welcome, he stayed there, taking with her that solace of which both were most fain. Pinocchio being thus with the girl, it chanced that certain things, being overset by a cat, fell with a noise that aroused the good woman, who, fearing that it might be a matter of more consequence, got up as best she might in the dark, and betook her to the place whence the noise seemed to proceed. At the same time Adriano, not by reason of the noise, which he heeded not, but perchance to answer the call of nature, also got up, and questing about for a convenient place, came upon the cradle beside the good woman's bed, and not being able otherwise to go by, took it up, and set it beside his own bed, and when he had accomplished his purpose, went back, and giving never a thought to the cradle, got him to bed. The good woman searched until she found that the accident was no such matter as she had supposed, so, without troubling to strike a light to investigate it further, she reproved the cat, and returned to the room, and groped her way straight to the bed in which her husband lay asleep. But not finding the cradle there, quoth she to herself, "Alas, blunderer that I am, what was I about? God's faith, I was going straight to the guest's bed." And proceeding a little further, she found the cradle, and laid herself down by Adriano in the bed that was beside it, taking Adriano for her husband. And Adriano, who was still awake, received her with all due benignity, and tackled her more than once, to her no small delight. Meanwhile, Pinocchio, fearing lest sleep should overtake him while he was yet with his mistress, and having satisfied his desire, got up and left her to return to his bed. But when he got there, coming upon the cradle, he supposed that 'twas the host's bed, and so going a little further, he laid him down beside the host, who thereupon awoke. Supposing that he had Adriano beside him, "I warrant thee," quoth Pinocchio to the host, "there was never so sweet a piece of flesh as Nicolosa. By the body of God, such delight have I had of her as never had man of woman. And mark me, since I left thee, I have gotten me up to the farm 6 times." Which tidings the host, being none too well pleased to learn, said first of all to himself, "What the devil does this fellow here?" Then, his resentment getting the better of his prudence, "'Tis a gross affront thou hast put upon me, Pinocchio," quoth he, "nor know I what occasion thou hast to do me such a wrong. But by the body of God I will pay thee out." Pinocchio, who was not the most discreet of gallants, albeit he was now apprised of his error, instead of doing his best to repair it, retorted, "And wilt thou pay me out? What canst thou do?" "Hark, what high words our guests are at together," quoth meanwhile the host's wife to Adriano, deeming that she spoke to her husband. "Let them be," replied Adriano with a laugh. "God give them a bad year. They drank too much yestereve." The good woman had already half recognized her husband's angry tones, and now that she heard Adriano's voice, she at once knew where she was, and with whom. Accordingly, being a discreet woman, she started up, and saying never a word, took her child's cradle, and though there was not a ray of light in the room, bore it, divining rather than feeling her way, to the side of the bed in which her daughter slept. And then, as if aroused by the noise made by her husband, she called him, and asked what he and Pinocchio were bandying words about. "Hearest thou not," replied the husband, "what he says he has this very night done to Nicolosa?" "Tush, he lies in the throat," returned the good woman. "He has not lain with Nicolosa. For what time he might have done so, I laid me beside her myself, and I have been wide awake ever since. And thou art a fool to believe him. You men take so many cups before going to bed that then you dream and walk in your sleep and imagine wonders. 'Tis a great pity you do not break your necks. What does Pinocchio there? Why keeps he not in his own bed?" Whereupon Adriano, in his turn, seeing how adroitly the good woman cloaked her own and her daughter's shame, "Pinocchio," quoth he, "I have told thee 100 times that thou shouldst not walk about at night, for this thy bad habit of getting up in thy dreams and relating thy dreams for truth will get thee into a scrape some time or another. Come back, and God see thee a bad night." Hearing Adriano thus confirm what his wife had said, the host began to think that Pinocchio must be really dreaming. So he took him by the shoulder and fell a-shaking him and calling him by his name, saying, "Pinocchio, wake up and go back to thy bed." Pinocchio, taking his cue from what he had heard, began, as a dreamer would be like to do, to talk wanderingly, whereat the host laughed amain. Then, feigning to be aroused by the shaking, Pinocchio uttered Adriano's name, saying, "Is it already day, that thou callest me?" "Ay, 'tis so," quoth Adriano. "Come hither." Whereupon Pinocchio, making as if he were mighty drowsy, got him up from beside the host and back to bed with Adriano. On the morrow, when they were arisen, the host fell a-laughing and making merry touching Pinocchio in his dreams, and so the jest passed from mouth to mouth, while the gallants' horses were groomed and saddled and their valises adjusted, which done, they drank with the host, mounted and rode to Florence, no less pleased with the manner than with the matter of the night's adventure. Nor, afterwards, did Pinocchio fail to find other means of meeting Nicolosa, who assured her mother that he had unquestionably dreamed. For which cause the good woman, calling to mind Adriano's embrace, accounted herself the only one that had watched. End of Day 9, the 6th story.